Cynthia, you have the ball.
Thank you, Bill. Welcome to all our attendees and participants, and welcome everyone and presenters to a webinar on National Professional Development Grant Performance Reports. And today's webinar is hosted by the National Clearinghouse for English Language Acquisition, NCELA, located at the Graduate School of Education and Human Development at the George Washington University and funded through a contract with the U.S. Department of Education's Office of English Language Acquisition. Our mission at NCELA is to provide technical assistance information to state and local educational agencies on issues pertaining to English language learners. My name is Cynthia, research scientist at NCELA and your webinar facilitator for today. Just some technical announcements. If you are having technical difficulties with either sound or logging on, not so much logging on, because if you can't log on, you will not be able to see this number, but you could hear us, please call in at 1-866-229-3239. And for those who are logged on participants, please, if you'd like to submit questions during the webinar presentation, please click on the third tab on the top right-hand corner of your screen that says Q&A. Question and answers are to be submitted to the presenter in the chat box in text format. And also note, if you would like a copy of the PowerPoint, they are available on the NCELA website at www.ncela.gwu.edu webinars. Now on to our presenters for today. Today we have Cynthia Ryan and Samuel Lopez. Cynthia Ryan is the Discretionary Grants Division Director, and Samuel Lopez is the National Professional Development Program Manager. Both are from the Office of English Language Acquisition, OELA, at the U.S. Department of Education. Welcome to both of you. The presentation today will explain the various performance reports required for the NPD grant and what to consider when completing the two performance reports due each year, as well as differentiating data information for the annual performance report and the final performance report. We'll begin our webinar today with Samuel Lopez, who will begin with an overview of the Government Performance Results Act, NPD GREPA measures. Okay, and we'll begin right now with Sam Lopez. And Sam, if I could just ask you to unmute yourself, and we can all hear you. Thank you.
Do you hear me now?
Yes, we hear you now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Before we get started, Cindy, our division director, and myself want to let you know that we have planned some follow-up activity teleconferences related to the webinar. And these will be conducted between the grantee and the program, OELA program officer assigned to that particular grantee. And we'll mention this again toward the end in our reminders.
Okay.
So we want to begin with a quick overview of the Government Performance Results Act, also referred to as GEPRA. This is very important, particularly for the new project directors. We want you to have the context for which we are mandated to have annual performance reports submitted to OELA. This act, which was passed in 1993, basically requires performance measures to be collected via the grantee performance report, which are completed by the project directors or their program. Our program offices use GEPRA data to help make decisions about grantee continuation funding and to show overall program progress by aggregating data across grantees or programs. GEPRA data may also be used by Congress to determine future program funding. We refer to the Act as GEPRA measures because there are 6 distinctive measures. The first 3 deal specifically with pre-service program completers. Very important that particularly new project directors have a full, clear understanding of these requirements, and we ask that if you have any questions, please contact your program officer. The following 3 measures, which are 1.4, 1.5, and 1.6. 1.4 particularly deals with paraprofessionals who are enrolled in the professional development program. 1.5 and 1.6 address in-service teacher completers. There are basically 3 types of reports that we are asking for grantees to submit. The first one is the Annual Performance Report, APR, and this one should contain the target performance data specific to the budget period. Now, you will hear several times, Cindy and myself will repeat or mention budget period, each budget period. This is very important because the reports are geared to speak to that particular year, that reporting year. This year, for our new grantees, the 2011 grantees, the APR, or the Annual Performance Report, will be due in the spring, on May 30th, 2012. The Complete Data Report, which in a sense is like the second part of the report because it's later on in the year, it contains the actual GEPRA performance data. Here's where we focus on more specific quantitative numbers or quantitative data. And this one is due in the fall, this year, October 31st, 2012. The Final Performance Report, FPR, contains actual GEPRA performance data for the final budget period, and this is due 90 days after the end of the project period, which includes the possibility of a request for a no-cost extension, and we'll mention that a little more in a moment. All of the reports, and this is an area that some grantees are sometimes asking about, Cindy, the reports are all submitted via the same forms.
That's correct. We use the same form for all 3 of our reports, but the information that we're asking you to provide is a little bit different. And you don't necessarily fill out all sections of the report depending upon the form, and we'll go into that later.
And one of the things that I'd like to mention related to grantees who have asked on occasions, where do you report cumulative accounts of your program? In other words, some would like to know what section of the report form can be used to tell the full story of their project success or progress from year 1 to the present. And this is basically contained in the executive summary. So do you want to elaborate on that, Cindy?
I'll talk about it more later in my section.
Okay. In terms of the Final Performance Report, there are sections that are required to be completed. We're looking now at the slide that says Final Performance Report, FPR. The cover sheet, all the sections must be completed. We mentioned briefly now the executive summary. There is a template, and here's where you can provide a summary of the project, and Cindy will mention a little more later. The GEPRA performance data, section A, and this is only for grantees that serve pre-service, in-service, or paraprofessionals. GEPRA performance data, section A, In the case of the 2007 grantees, they'll report based on participants served completed during the reporting period. This period extends from July 2nd, 2011 through July 1st, 2012. And again, this includes the no-cost extension period and participants who have completed the prior year. Continuing on to our next slide, information on the project goals and objectives. This is section B. Keep in mind we're talking about the final performance report. Report data on final project year and any period of no-cost extension. And we're saying not all years, all years are required in terms of the data. It is not cumulative, and this is why we emphasize budget period or that particular year, reporting year. Budget information on section C. Explanation of funds have not been drawn down, not expended, or expended at the expected rate. This should be explained in section C. Additional information can be provided via section D, and this is a conclusion about the success of the project and its impact or any barriers encountered. Grantees report actual performance data on GEPRA measures for the final budget period. The reporting period is the final project year, which in the case of 2007 is fifth year for them. And again, the period from July 2nd rather, 2012 to July 1st, 2012, plus any period of no-cost extension. The report for our 2007 grantees is due on October 2nd, 2012. That's correct. And the 2007 grantees do not have to submit the APR in the spring or the complete data report in the fall. Finally, 2007 grantees will not report on pre-service participants who completed the program of study 3 years prior. We want to take a moment here and to mention to you that what is the no-cost extension. This can be requested for up to a 12-month period, and what you need to do is contact your program officer. Briefly, as you may know, the purpose of the no-cost extension, or NCE, is a request to extend the closing date of a project in order to ensure the successful completion of set project goals, objectives, and activities. NCE is not allowed or approved for the sole purpose of using unexpended funds. So there is a purpose for which a no-cost extension is requested. And with that, I think it's important, before I turn it over to Cindy, to remind everyone that if they have questions, if they need more clarity on some of these items that we're mentioning, it's a short period in any webinar, that they should contact their program officer.
Absolutely. And I would also add that if you cannot get in touch with your program specialist right away and you need to talk to them, that you can always feel free to call me or Sam. Okay, so now we're going to move to the portion of the webinar that is of most interest at this point to the 2011 grant, where we're going to talk about the APR and the complete data report. And the next report that the 2011 grant will submit is the annual performance report, and it's due May 30th, 2012. The important thing to remember about the cover sheet section there, it's information that you had reported earlier, some of it in your application, but it includes other information, and one of those is the budget expenditures. It's real important that you confer with your budget office. In fact, the form asks you to ask the budget office to complete it, because you may not have all the up-to-date information on the expenditures. The next thing, and this is new, we're deviating from our past practice for those of you who had a 2007 grant regarding the executive summary. And before we had told you, well, you don't really have to include an executive summary because you're going to be reporting progress in the explanation of progress in your in the narrative portion of the complete data of the annual performance report. But one of the things that we asked the new grants to do, the 2011 grants, that we had not asked the 2007 grants to do, was to project targets for all the out years, the first year and all the remaining years in their original application. That is in the abstract section. Now, some of the grantees, some of you who are grantees did complete targets, and some did not. And some of you who completed targets just did it for 1 year, and others did it for 2 years or 3 years, and some combined the totals. So what we're going to do is to have you all relook at your targets, because in fact, you may have received your grant later than what you had anticipated. That may have thrown off your whole original plan for how many participants you would recruit and how many you would place. So we're going to give you the opportunity to take another look at it and consider what your targets are going to be for all the GEPRA measures that are applicable to your program for the current year and all following years. And we'll be giving you some more instructions on that when we send out the form to you. The annual performance report reports on GEPRA, but not actual data. Here's where you're just going to report your targets. The actual data is reported in the complete data report, which we'll talk about next. But most important for the annual performance report is really the section on the project goals and objectives. This is where you report quantitative and qualitative data, numbers as well as narrative summary about how you have been meeting progress of your grant, about what activities you've conducted and how the activities that you've conducted are supporting your objectives. The thing to remember, too, about this section for the 2011 grant is that, again, many of you are not going to be reporting that much information because your grant may have started late. You may not have, you may, in fact, have used this as a planning period. You may not have had participants until the second semester. But this is the place where you can explain all of that. And the other thing is that these reports do not cover a full year. The reason for that is that we have to use the information from the report, the progress information, to say that you've made progress so that we can actually give you a grant award. Or in other words, we don't want your first year to lapse and you not to have a grant award. So when you're describing the explanation of progress, and I'd say the project objective is really the heart of the annual performance report, you're going to talk about progress that you've made in meeting each objective and activities that support those objectives. And if you haven't made progress, you can explain why and what you're going to do in order to make sure that you do make progress in the future. It might be hard to do this in the first annual performance report because of such a short time period, but if you have data on how you have made improvements in the project, you know, the formative aspect of your evaluation, that would be helpful too. The budget information, this is section C. This is not what I was referring to earlier, which is on the face page where you just your budget office is reporting dollar amounts. This is a narrative explanation, and again, you need to coordinate it with your budget office because you will probably not have information on expenditures, and you certainly aren't in charge of drawing down funds. You'll also want to describe any expected carryover that that you think you may have by the end of the project period. This isn't something that we're going to hold you to. It doesn't necessarily affect your subsequent grant awards, but it gives us an idea of how you're spending your funds. And then you want to describe any changes that you might have made to the budget or any changes that were planned or unanticipated. The last section of the annual performance report, most people don't even complete this. It would only be for those of you who have had changes in partners. Those are usually your LEA partners or other partners, or change in the project director. And you can also use this portion to explain any progress that was not reported in the previous APR. Remember, we said that the APR only covers a partial period. So from April until July, or whatever your project period is, there may be information that you didn't have a chance to report because the report was due in May. So this is an opportunity to kind of catch up and report on that information. So the first time you would ever do that would, of course, be your next APR because you don't have a previous report at this point. Again, we don't report on a full year. Just to underscore some things, grantees report target GEPRA data, not actual data. And we're repeating a few things because these are issues that some grantees have had difficulty with, or many throughout the year. So we just want to point that out. The targets should reflect, when you're thinking about planning the targets, they should reflect what was approved in your grant application or what was approved in writing subsequent to the application. So that's what I was talking about when I said in the APR and the executive summary, here's your opportunity to develop your targets. They should be reasonable, and they should be based on your program design and expectations. In other words, how many participants you expect to train and complete and place. And some of the targets may be difficult to determine regarding follow-up. But we're going to talk more about strategies for reporting on the three-year measure placement and the one-year measure for pre-service. We'll talk more about that later when we do an electronic community of practice with all of you. Another thing to remember is that targets are annual, and they're based on each budget year, not cumulative, and they're not reported for the three-year GEPRA performance measure. Targets are never reported, only actual data is reported for that. So one of the things you want to be thinking about with your evaluator and your project staff is what are some of the strategies that you can use to follow up completers and graduates. And you should always attempt to follow up all graduates and completers. That should be the goal. And we recognize that that's not always possible, but it's a good goal to have. Now, the complete data report uses the same form as the annual performance report and the final performance report. And on this, you don't have to really complete as much on the cover sheet. Just items 1 through 7 and the signature. The executive summary uses a template. Again, this will be cumulative information, and we'll be providing you with that template. And the GEPRA performance data, section A, is reporting on actual data. So this report will follow your annual performance report, and it's due in October. You don't have to complete the project goals and objectives because you will have already reported on that in the APR. You don't have to complete the budget section, and you don't have to complete the additional information. So this section is really going to focus on the GEPRA measures. And this is a little bit of new information. So if you've had 2007 grants before, you may recall it being different in terms of what we're asking you to do here. But if you served, or in any reporting period, if you served in service or pre-service teachers or paraprofessionals in a 2-year program, you did that during the reporting period, you would submit a complete data report even if you did not produce completers, because what we want you to do is to indicate how many were served. That's one piece of data on the new form that we've been asking for. And if your program served other than personnel above, for example, if you're serving school psychologists or only administrators, then we'd like you to at least submit an executive summary and the cover sheet. When you're explaining the data, and by the way, the explanation of progress is so important because it's here where we sometimes find discrepancies between the narrative and the quantitative data. And the narrative actually can help point out a misunderstanding about what we're asking you to report on. So what you're going to talk about in the explanation of progress are there, say, discrepancies between your targets and your actual data. And if you did not make progress or achieve your target, we would ask you to provide an explanation as to why you didn't and what steps you would take to address the issue. And then, of course, you want to talk about how data and information were used to make improvement in the project. Generally, that's going to be more appropriate to reporting in the annual performance report. It's more relevant probably to your project objectives. But if it applies for your data, you can report on this as well. And then really important are the challenges in collecting data on participants who have completed the program of study. We know it's a challenge, particularly looking at the 3-year measure. So it's very helpful for you all to document that for us. Not only to explain discrepancies in your data or why targets weren't met, but also to give us an idea of what the specific challenges are so that we can help improve our form or our technical assistance or possibly future DECRA measures. Okay. The grantee performance report, and I'm looking right here, this is referring to the pre-service teacher, item A1 of section A, and you'll notice that we're asking for multiple kinds of information over multiple years. So we want to know how many were served during the reporting period, how many completed the program of study during the reporting period, how many completed the program prior to the reporting period, 1 year, and how many completed the program 3 years prior. And let's take a look at, this is taken from the DECRA chart from the APR and grant performance report form chart. This section is for pre-service participants. So you can see in the grayed out areas, those are the different years that we're asking grantees to report on. And obviously, nobody's going to report on anything on the prior year for those of you who are 2011 grants because you don't have a prior year we're starting with this year. But next year you will.
And Cindy, just to highlight, and it's pretty self-explanatory, but anyone who does not have any participants that are pre-service, all they'll do is just indicate no right at the top there of the form and move on to the next section.
That's correct, Sam. And as a matter of fact, one thing that would be very helpful too, and we actually ask you to do this, but some grantees may not have noticed in the instructions, that we would ask you, if you say you're serving pre-service participants, then we would ask you, did you serve any of the reporting year? And rather than leave blank, we would ask you to put a 0 if you didn't serve any of the reporting year. So the first question has to do you serve them? And even if you didn't have participants, even if you didn't serve them, even if you didn't have completers, you would check the number of pre-service participants served in the program during the reporting year. And if there were none in the reporting year, because some grants don't have completers every year, particularly not in the first year. particularly pre-service participants. So in other words, your target may be 0, and that's fine. Better to include a 0 there than to leave it blank, because then it raises questions on our part as to whether maybe you had just skipped that particular data element. And you'll notice this is the 3-year measure. And so you'll see how the target is actually X'd out, and that's because, again, you're not going to ever report on target, just on the actual data and the complete data report. I'm sorry, in the final performance report. This section deals with paraprofessionals. Again, keep in mind that this has to do not with paraprofessionals that are pre-service teachers, but those that are improving their skills as paraprofessionals, usually in a 2-year program of study. Now, the in-service participant questions, it's important to notice that there are really 2 types of in-service participants. There are in-service participants who are working toward ESL or bilingual certification, and then there are those that are in programs that are not designed to do that. So keep in mind that these sections are related to one or each of the types of participants in the programs. In other words, the first one has to do with programs that are designed to help participants achieve state or local certification. And let me go over this for a second too. We're asking on C to have you report in-service participants served. And so that is just the number of participants that you served. D is those that completed the program of study. So that means they've completed the coursework and the field practice, whatever your program of study is. And E is where we're asking, of those students, how many of them actually obtained certification as a result of the program. This is sometimes more of a challenge, as some grantees have reported to us, because they may not know unless the participants or perhaps in some cases the state is informing them as to whether the participant completed certification. So again, if your target was that 100% of them would obtain certification, and you didn't meet that target because you didn't have information on all, then you would want to include that in the explanation of progress. And this next section at the top that's grayed out, that has to do with those participants that are not designed to lead, in programs not designed to lead to certification. And the last one is real important because this actually applies to both kinds of programs, both those leading to certification and not leading to certification. Often grantees who had filled out the first section, who have participants who are in programs that are designed to lead to certification and don't have those in the second section, kind of skip this and go on. But everybody who serves in-service participants who has completers is going to respond to this. Just a couple of reminders, the GEPRA targets and actual data reported for each year, not cumulative years. Executive summary reports information for all years, and all projects that produce in-service completers will report on the measure that I was just talking about. And the other thing is to remember to use raw numbers in the targets and not percentages. The raw numbers, the percentages is what we used to have you use, and that the 2007 grantees will remember, which was just a disaster. And so with the help of the Data Quality Initiative in the department, we designed a new form, and that's why we're asking you to report raw numbers. It's just easier for us to do the calculation and figure out the percentages. And just a reminder on this, these have to do with in-service completers and pre-service participants who completed, and that's what I was talking about a little bit earlier. You're going to report on those who obtain certification, on those that you have data who obtain, or information or knowledge who obtain certification. And again, if you have a discrepancy between your target and your actual data, then you'll just explain it in the explanation of progress section. Wanted to remind everybody that we're going to have the teleconference, and we'll be scheduling that with you in April. We haven't planned particular dates. What we may do is to actually schedule multiple, so that if you're in different time zones or maybe different days and you can't make it, this is particularly for the 2011 grantees. This webinar will be posted on the Incela website, so I would encourage you to have your evaluators, if they're not listening now, and other staff that are involved in the evaluation to view it.
I think that's an area, Cindy, that we've had a lot of questions. Sometimes we will get a report and we will need additional information, so we contact the project director, and in some instances, for whatever reason, some of the information perhaps has not been shared completely or reviewed and agreed upon as we're asking for the project director and the evaluator, whether it's an internal evaluator or external, that the project director is fully versed on what the report contains before it's sent out to us, so that when because we're, as program officers, we're going to get a hold of the project director, not the evaluator, for clarity or additional information.
That's right. That's a good point, Sam. Instructions for submitting, and I think Sam alluded to this, just make sure you've reviewed the performance report and you agree with it, because it's really your report and not the evaluators. And when you submit the report, please do it as an email attachment and include the grant number. You know, we live and die by numbers around here because we have so many grants that have multiple grants. So don't just put the name of your institution in the subject line, but the grant number would be really helpful. If you ever need an extension to a report, call your program specialist. I will say that it's relatively easy to get extensions for final performance reports and for completed reports, but you don't want to have an extensive extension for the annual performance report, because we really need that information so that we can review and do information in our grants management system and cut the grant award so that you don't have an interruption of service.
And I guess that concludes this particular aspect of our webinar. We're here now at the question and answer segment of our webinar. And we have a couple of questions that we will dive into in a moment, but I just wanted to get a show of electronic hands to see how many people are actually participating in groups. And if you could just click on the electronic hand right above the blue chat line, that would be great. Thank you. And I have a couple of questions for both you and Sam, Cindy.
Mm-hmm.
One of them, question that came in, and we were going back and forth, is in reference to slide 28. I think it's briefly mentioned, but it is in regards to if a particular person or grantee is working with paraprofessionals that are, but not paraprofessionals that are part of a program that meets certification, licensure, or endorsement requirements.
Right.
Do they report the numbers in GEPRA, or just as part of project objectives?
No. If they're serving paraprofessionals, as I'm understanding you to say, Katia, that these are not pre-service teachers, these are paraprofessionals working toward a 2-year degree. Is that what you're talking about?
They're not. They're in the program, but it's not a program to meet certification, licensure, or endorsement requirements.
Oh, okay. Well, then they would still...
It's not part of that program.
They would still report that they are serving paraprofessionals. But where we ask for data on the number who had completed a certification, their target would be 0 and their actual data would be 0.
Okay.
for that particular data item.
For that particular, okay. And so they would just refer, okay. I think
So
that answers.
they'll report the participants that were served, they'll report the completers, but they would have a target of 0 for certification.
Okay. Now, if the grantees have students who are not making adequate progress and do not avail themselves of the support that's provided, one grantee was asking, can they be dropped from the program and maybe replaced with another candidate so that they can invest further in them, rather?
Yes.
And what the consequences are for reporting.
Well, I think if you are monitoring your participants and find that they aren't making progress and you try to support them in doing that, that certainly you as a grantee have the option to drop them and to recruit new participants. It would only make sense rather than to continue to carry someone who may not be able to complete the program anyway. On the other hand, if you're having a whole lot of these, then you might need to take a look at your recruitment strategies and your support systems.
And if I may add, very important, obviously, for that grantee, that project director, to be in consultation with the program officer at all times related to these changes, because we here want to be able to work with you and track your reporting. If we're making modifications, that's going to modify your report, obviously, because you're no longer speaking of the same number. It possibly could be the same number, actually. It could be a slight increase or a decrease, depending on your circumstance. But the program officer, along with the project director, the program officer needs to be aware of what the changes are taking place so that when we look and analyze your report, we know, although you probably will provide an explanation, but rather it be beforehand than after the fact.
Okay. Now, is follow-up for completers required if the project does not aim at certification? And this is a follow-up from Cindy.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So is follow-up, and if I understand you correctly, are you asking? Well, there is, because if we're talking about in-service teachers, for example, in-service teacher completers, well, you're going to want to be able to report whether or not they were placed in the instructional setting serving ELs. Okay. Now, if your program isn't designed to provide certification, then no, you don't have to follow up for that.
Okay. And now I'm going to get into a couple of more budgeting questions that I have here that have come in. Well, this first question from a grantee is, if grants have multiple institutions that are participating, that are written into the grant, such as subcontractors, and are receiving funds, would each institution's business office be responsible for a budget report?
No. The annual performance report and the final performance report, those are submitted by the fiscal agent, who is maybe the lead consortia of multiple institutions of higher ed. But they are the primary grant and the fiscal agent, and they really are in control of the budget. So they would not involve other institutions in the budget. And, I would need to take a look at the budget. So if that project director would like to contact us and talk more about this, we would be delighted.
Okay. Thank you. And one more question regarding, there are a couple of questions that have come in, and I'm just going to collapse them into one. But one is, are the APR and CDR deadlines the same for the 2007 and 2011 grantees?
Are they? No, they are different. And
okay.
and they're in this PowerPoint. We talked about them, but
The 07,
October 2nd.
and October 31st for the 2011.
Yeah, the 07.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
This is the,
Yeah, I'm trying to find the slide
the
here.
07 is the October.
And
2nd.
which slide number?
That's okay. October 2nd
Okay.
is the deadline for the final performance report
For the 07.
for the 07.
For the 07, okay.
And essentially how the final works is that regardless of any deadline that we would say, it's always going to be 90 days after the end of the project, the last day on the grant award, and any no-cost extension. So if they got a 6-month no-cost extension, it would be 90 days plus 6 months from the end of the date on their grant award period.
Right, and then there was the 31st of October for the new ones, for the 2011.
The 31st of October, and that's for the complete data report.
Right.
For the 2011 grant.
Okay. And the second part of that was, and should a request for a no-cost extension be filed? And is there a deadline? When should? Yeah.
The no-cost extension, and I think Sam had gone over this, but this is important that the department actually officially says you can request a no-cost extension within 10 days of the end of your grant period, but I would highly suggest that grantees not do that. And if you know now, and I'm talking particularly to the 2007 grants, if you know now that you will have carryover funds, then you should contact your program specialist and do it now. That way we have time to review it, get it in the system, send the grant award to you. And if there are any issues, we have time to take care of it because, people sometimes are on vacation at the same time that the project directors are submitting this information. And we've run into trouble where a no-cost extension was not provided early enough for the grantee. So no reason to wait. Go ahead and contact your program specialist now.
Okay. Thank you. And I think we have one more question here. This is a grantee who's in their first year of the grant and had projected 0 grant graduates tied to their GREPA measure number 1. But in reality, they had a few who will or may complete their work this spring or summer. So what happens if they do not pass all of their certification exams? And she's, from Texas, and she's saying the exams are stringent, and what impact will that have on the grant?
Well, a couple of things. There would still be information for them to report, even if they don't have all the completers. So I would say that in terms of the impact on the grant, what would be most important for that grantee to consider is what are their targets going to look like? Are you telling me that in the past a lot of participants in a particular program have had trouble completing the certification? And really, what does that mean? I'm assuming difficulty in actually practicing as a teacher. So I think that we can always expect that maybe a participant or some participants may not pass a test the first time, and it might take them longer to pass the test, and there may be some who never do. But obviously the goal would be, as many as possible. In terms of the grant, it's like everything else that we've been talking about in terms of follow-up. We really want the grantees to attempt to get that information, and when there's a disparity between your targets and your actual data, then we want you to include that in the explanation of progress. But, maybe more important is to consider really what does that information mean for the project? What would be, rather than talk about any measure that we would take regarding the grant, I would be most interested in how frequently this is happening, and what does that tell the grantee about what they may need to do to improve their program, whether it's providing additional support services, or maybe it has something to do with who they're recruiting. So that again, that formative information is probably the most important response to this particular question.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else with Sam?
No, just to say that very important that, as I've stated before, that there be a constant flow of communication between the project director and their program officer. As Cindy said before, if you're having any difficulties that I can assist with, please feel free to email me or phone, leave me a message, and we will get back to you as soon as we possibly can.
Okay, thank you. And going back to just clarification on the issue of certification, and meaning, does certification include a university certificate, or does it only refer to state licensure?
Well, this is really going to refer to state licensure because it's whatever is needed for that individual to be able to teach English learners in the state. So whereas a university licensure may not carry that same weight.
Okay. And this same grantee was wondering, do we have an updated version of the GEPRA report document, Ed 524B? I guess they must have, or is there a URL?
The ED 524B is actually a form that we don't use anymore. That was the generic annual performance report and grant performance report form. Now that's what we've moved away from to the NPD custom report, the grant performance report form. So I guess it's posted on our website, and that I think one of the earlier slides where we had included, here it is.
This one right here? Okay.
It's on that last bullet. If grantees go there, and we're in progress building this information, but they will see the performance report posted there, and that's the current one.
Okay. Okay, so you'll see it's this particular link. Thank you. And we're coming closely. We still have a little bit more time, but
Katia,
yes?
I think this would be a good opportunity to just mention the wealth of information that our grantees, project directors, and the like can access from Ancela. And we just like to highlight that because also Ancela serves as our communication in many instances for announcements. So, no, Cindy wants to add to that.
No, I think often we will use Ancela as a vehicle because it can be faster to get information directly to the grantees. So we want to make sure that all of our new grantees are signed up for the electronic newsletter.
Yes, and most people can sign up for the newsletter or the listserv by going to our website on www.ncela.gwu.edu without the webinars. .edu, and on the right-hand side, they'll see where we have resources, and it'll say listserv, and they can sign up for the Ancela listserv.
Good. Thank you, Katia.
You're welcome. And we have a couple of folks who would like for you to repeat the dates on the APR, the reporting dates. I think you said October 2nd, 2007, and...
No, well, let's clarify that. Is the October date is the complete data report.
It's the complete data report.
Yeah. The APR is due May 30th. And that's the very next report that they're going to report on.
Okay. Of this year. 2012. Okay. And I think that concludes all of our questions, and you pretty much answered most of the questions that have come in. Some of them have been consolidated, and the PowerPoints, of course, will be available on our website for anyone, and the archived link will be up, and it's usually up 2 days after the date of the webinar. Okay. Any final remarks, Sam, Cindy?
Just to say that if any of these sections that we've covered, obviously in one webinar is not, particularly for the new project directors, it could be a little overwhelming, but just to emphasize that the program officers are available to them, as well as myself and Cindy, to respond to any further clarifications that they may need. Feel free always to email us or leave us a message.
Yeah, we appreciate that. And it's always better to ask than to maybe struggle with assumption, because it also helps us understand where we may not be being clear with our instructions. And usually if a project director has a question, there are other project directors that have a very similar question. So we do appreciate that feedback and request for clarification.
Okay. Oh, and one more thing. When can we expect the annual report template to come through?
We can actually send that to everybody this week. And I think what they're talking about is the executive summary template.
Mm-hmm.
Well, actually not this week, next week, early next week.
Early next week. Okay. Perfect. So this concludes actually our webinar session today. Thank you very much, Cindy and Sam. This was really informative. Thank you so much. And this concludes our webinar on National Professional Development Grant Performance Reports, presented by Cynthia Ryan and Samuel Lopez, and hosted by the National Clearinghouse for English Language Acquisition and Fellow, located at the Graduate School of Education and Human Development at the George Washington University. For more information, as Cindy noted, you're more than, of course, you contact your representative, but additional questions regarding this presentation, contact Cynthia Ryan at cynthia.ryan@ed.gov or Samuel Lopez at samuel.lopez@ed.gov. And if you have additional questions regarding the webinar itself, PowerPoints, and so on, please contact Katya Flemons at kflemons@gwu.edu. Thank you very much. And again, this webinar will be archived on the NCELA website at www.ncela.gwu.edu/webinars. Thank you.